Hello and welcome to my podcast today. I am out taking a walk, and so some of you can listen to this on Unemployed Idealist podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, and some of you can watch this on YouTube, my new video feed for my podcast. Wherever it is, I hope that you are watching this or encountering this, not just sitting, but out enjoying your world, taking your own walk. It's the little bit that makes me wish that I could be walking next to you, but I take some comfort in thinking that maybe some of you are out walking and enjoying this on your daily walk. So I am trying a little bit different technology. I am trying to make podcasting bigger in my life than arranging the podcasts and editing and sound and video. And yet each step I take increases that. Oh, wow. That was just you probably didn't hear it from my mic, but a grouse took off and flew. It's that season of the year when the grouse don't have the leaves. Oops, there goes another one. Don't have a good way to let that be part of your experience. Maybe one will get lucky. The problem is they fly forward and not back. Oh well, this time of year the leaves are coming off, and so in the summer the grouse can hide, and mostly they do that, but as the leaves are gone they suddenly find that the distance that they are seems much closer because there's no leaves, and then they get flushed out and fly. There's been a lot fewer grouse in the last few years because we have more turkeys, and the turkeys find the grouse nests and stomp on the eggs. And so it's an interesting balance of nature that is changing as we watch. But that is not what we are here talking about. This is only incidentally a nature walk. I do have some notes that I might refer to occasionally. I want to move on from the last podcast, so I need to very quickly review two ideas that are really important. The first is that the kind of negotiation which you want to be part of is a negotiation that says, how can I get more of what I want while giving you more of what you want? Okay, that is not a zero-sum negotiation, which says, how can I get what you have and get you to agree to give it to me? An honest negotiation, and the ideal of negotiation is to say, there might be something where you can get more of what you want while I'm getting more of what I want. It's a negotiation that depends upon you being honest about what you want. It also requires you to believe that your best partner is someone different than you. You don't want to have someone who wants the same things as you, because then you are stuck with a zero sum. And fortunately, I believe men and women are very different. We were optimized for life that only recently has become a life of button pushers. And so maybe had we had smartphones and robotic machines from the beginning, maybe we wouldn't have been optimized quite so much. Although I still think that we are optimized for two different roles in raising kids. And as such, the partnership between a man and a woman is sort of an ideal negotiating partnership, because the difference in values allows you to both get more of what you want at the same time, if you decide that that's what you're headed for and you don't settle for less. Now, that has been a mainstay of my podcasts for quite some time. But the point that comes to us right now is the idea of the promise and how the promise fits in. Okay, so if your negotiation is a zero-sum negotiation, you're trying to figure out how to get a greater portion of what I have and get me to agree to it, then the purpose of your promise, the purpose of the promise you elicit from me, is to chain me to something which I am likely to find suboptimal. So you're going to ensure that when I figure out that it was a bad deal, that I negotiated a bad deal for myself, that my promise keeps me stuck to it. And I guess that that's a very useful thing. It's just a very dismal thing. It's not something that I want to really focus on. That makes the promise the chains that bind me to the suboptimal. And I suggested in the last podcast, I encourage you to watch it if this isn't making sense to you. It'll probably still not make sense to you, but you will have listened to a lot more of my words. No, I do think I lay it out pretty clearly, but the purpose of a promise is not to chain someone to the suboptimal. The purpose of a promise is to let somebody know, your partner, let them know the domains where coordination is most important and the domains where optimization is most important. So you can have a great idea, but if the person who is your partner doesn't know your great idea, the great improvement can cost you more than the benefit of implementing your optimized plan. So I use the illustration of a day when I promise my wife I'm going to come home right after whatever I'm doing, driving school bus. On a day when I promise, she is relying on that. So even though I have a unique opportunity on the way home, the benefit of the unique opportunity won't outweigh the problems that come from not coordinating. On other days when there isn't a promise, on the way home I see an opportunity and I take it, and she's glad. And so what I'm trying to emphasize is that the promise is not to chain people to something that you expect them to regret later. But the promise is your attempt to say, these are the areas that are open for optimization, and these are the areas where coordination is more important than optimization. So we're going to come to marriage. Marriage is a promise. I really don't like the idea that marriage is a promise that chains you to the suboptimal. And yet there are, a nail on the road is something we don't want. There are people who, by prioritizing the promise of being faithful to one person, appear to be suggesting that once you make a promise to that person, then you're absolved from optimizing. And I don't believe that. I believe that there are two failure modes for marriage. And one is, much has been made of the one in traditional religion, in a lot of traditional religions. So the failure mode of switching partners or ending your partnership. We'll go there, although that's an interesting topic in and of itself. So many people who end a partnership because it went badly. If we had high rates of divorce and almost no remarriage, It would make more sense than the fact that people get divorced and then somehow they think that it was the wrong partner, that the problem wasn't something, they get married again and again and again sometimes. Now, you could argue that, and this argument possibly holds more water now than it did in the past, is that if you are equipped to make the wrong promise, you might be in a situation where you got married with the wrong ideas. So if you got married at a young age because the church had licensed marriage and said the only way that you can have some relief for the sexual tension that is building in you is to get married, so hurry up and get married and then stay married. Now that you got married, you're stuck to that person. And if somebody said, no, that somehow I got married with the wrong values, and now that I've learned that, I could get married with a better set of values. Well, I'll tell you, whether I like it or not, I have seen a lot of couples where that has worked. I just did a funeral this week for someone, at a time when divorce wouldn't have been very common, got divorced, and then had many, many years of marriage, a long and faithful marriage with their second partner. And is that optimal? Well, it's not ideal. The ideal is one partner, you get the first person the right time. But given that ideal failed, that I can't be sad that they had 40 some years of marriage and built a family that certainly has troubles, but also an awful lot of good things. So all of that is to say that my point is that it has been easy to categorize what the church put forward as marriage without divorce started to look something like a marriage where you're chained to the suboptimal. And how would you solve that? Well, that's the second failure method. It's the failure method of wrecking your marriage by switching partners is very real. But the failure method of not vigorously optimizing your marriage is also failure. And so I want to describe to you what I think the right sort of promise should be. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that became the optimization of our promise for my wife and I. I used to not relate to people who wanted to renew their vows. Okay, if somebody, I would relate to them and not. On the basis of, we need an excuse to have a party. Man, hang out with me. I got more excuses to have a party than you can imagine. You don't have to wait until you're 25 or 30 or 50 years to renew your vows to have a party. Let's just have a party. So I can relate to that. But the part I can't relate to is the idea that renewing your vows would sort of make sense. So maybe this is a bad picture, but I like word pictures and they seem to clarify things for me. So imagine that there's this company and they need someone to provide a product for them. So they go to a smaller business and say, I would like to enter into a partnership where you provide this product or this service for me. And the company says, well, here's the deal. I can give you a lot better deal if you commit to me being your only supplier. So if I could be your only supplier and I didn't have to worry about that coming and going, so I would make a commitment to set my factory up to provide this service for you for the rest of time, as long as your business is going. And that seems like that might be a smart thing to do. It requires a lot of trust. But so now you have this company, these two companies that have been providing services for each other, who have been working together for years and years. And along comes somebody and says, well, you need to you need to renew that commitment. And it's like, okay, well, we can, but it's not particularly meaningful. The thing that makes our commitment, that anchors our commitment, to me, seems like the fact that we have worked together for so long. So it would have seemed to me like that commitment, that renewing that promise, could sound a little like reminding yourself that you're stuck with this person. If you didn't need to remind yourself that you were stuck with this person, if it was going well, I think you would not need to renew it. But if you needed to renew it, I would wonder what you were renewing. Now, that's classic Jeremy. I think things through to the point where they no longer make sense to me, and then they don't make sense to others. And I don't think most people do. Somebody says, why don't you renew your vows? And they say, oh yeah, let's do that. And so, blessings on you if you want to renew your vows. But it's one of those things that if you needed it, it would really bring questions to my mind, which is this whole idea of being chained to the suboptimal. But I suspect there are some of you who do need to renew your vows. I think you need to update your vows, actually. Although I don't think you're updating them to something that didn't exist. I think you would be updating them to what they were meant to be had they been described to you correctly. Now, my wife and I did this. We didn't do this formally. I was just feeling my way through this. But there was a point where it felt like I had made this promise. And I want to tell you, my wife is is. You understand, she's an eternal soul, but she's not here. My wife was a wonderful person. But I will tell you something, you don't have to have major flaws for it to be irritating over a long period of time. Okay? So 35 years were long enough for some things that the outside world would look at us and say, well, that's not too bad. That's a small thing. And yet it was long enough for there to be things multiplied by 35 years, multiplied by 365 days. If I did something a little bit irritating every other day, that's a huge load of irritation. That could go either direction. It did go either direction. And I realized that I was looking at my promise to my wife as a little bit like running out the clock. We were to a place where I was confident that I would not break our marriage vows. I just had to settle in, put up with those irritations. She had to put up with the irritations with me. We were stuck with each other, and we'd had a good run, and now we just had to run out the clock. And we tried that. And then we decided we didn't like that. And so we decided that we were going to put everything on the table except for who we were going to have it on the table with. I think that's bad grammar, but I'll try to restate it. We decided that we were going to put every agreement we'd ever made on the table, open for negotiation. We could talk about how it made us feel. We could talk about whether it was working. We could admit that we agreed to it for a wrong person. Every single agreement we had was open for renegotiation, except the promise that my renegotiating partner would be the same. Oh, watch this. There's a grouse. I don't know if you saw it. So my renegotiating partner was going to be Mary, period. But what we rejected was the idea that our promise chained us to the suboptimal. Our promise chained us to each other. We said, we are going to figure this out. We are going to figure out the kind of marriage that lasts until death do us part together. I am not going to decide that I got the wrong person. I am going to say, I got the person, and this is the person with whom I am going to figure out how to have an abundant life. And we started renegotiating things. I will tell you the most frustrating, probably in both directions, is that we had agreed, probably more from her to me because of my idea that you dig to the bottom of everything, you get to the bottom of this issue. But probably in both directions was the phenomena of having agreed to something that we didn't agree to. Having said, okay, just make the issue stop. I'll agree. And I'm like, well, honey, you wanted this. And she's like, well, honestly, now that we're renegotiating, I didn't want it. I just wanted the talking to stop. And wow. So you mean all of this time where I've been doing this as if it would make you happy, you're putting up with it because I didn't have a good way to allow you to say, stop the talking. And we eventually came up with a good way for that. We have a very specific mechanism of timeout. This is the keys to it. You can invent it however you want, or maybe I'll have a podcast on it. But timeout, you've got to have timeout. If you don't have timeout that works, then you will condemn yourself to only fixing problems that are smaller than your tolerance for conflict. And for some couples, that's pretty small. After they've been in conflict for 7 minutes, they disengage. And so they can only fix 7-minute problems. But over 35 years, guess what? You can make a problem that takes an awful long time to fix. So what my wife and I did is we built a system of timeout. And we said, right now, I want the talking to stop. But I don't want the issue to be forgotten. Or maybe I do want the issue to be forgotten, but it's not good if we forget this issue. So I need to have a timeout. And what we realized is that the person who calls time out has to be the person who calls time in. So the first experiments with time out between my wife and I went something like this. She would say, we got to stop. I can't be in conflict any longer. I need a timeout. I would give her a timeout. So I would have the issue that we were discussing when we called timeout. And then I would have a second issue that would come up. And finally, when the second issue came up, I was like, well, I can't wait any longer for us to fix the other issue. So I'm going to call time back. I'm going to call time in. And now we've got two issues. And then she would fight that for the length of time that she could stand to be in conflict. And then she would say, well, but I need a timeout. So I'd give her a timeout because I wanted this to work. But then I would call time in when there was another issue. And so I realized, Mary, we have to call time in when for some other reason than having another issue. And the only way we can do that, you can't leave it to me to call time in, because I'll call time in. Well, I'll call time in. I don't even want the timeout, so I'll call time in right away. So what I need you to do is I need you to call time in. So we set ourselves a rule that we followed. And that is that when Mary would call timeout, the issue was dropped. But sometime in the next 48 hours, she needed to call time in because she had called time out. Now, we had a consequence for that. Back before I was trying to be skinnier, the consequence is if she went 48 hours without a time in, then I got a pan of biscotti. And she made incredible biscotti. And I love tea. And man, her biscotti in the tea, it was incredible. Dipped in there. Okay. So, and I probably could have had biscotti just for asking, just like she could have had the back rub that she would get if I didn't call time in just for asking. But still, it gave us a tangible way to say, you have to call time in. Now, a few practical things. If you're trying to invent your version of time in, I'll tell you that sometimes we needed to call time in just so we could call time out and get another 48 hours. So there are days when we didn't have any time to sit and talk for 48 hours, for longer. But it still was required of her or me to say, I'm calling time in, but we're expected here in 15 minutes. So I'm calling time in, and then I'm going to call time out. But I want you to know that I am still tracking the timeout and the commitment. Okay, that worked for us. But then we had to add one more thing. We had to add to our timeout, we had to add a record keeper. The person who called timeout needed to write down a summary of how far the argument had gotten. And this one is, well, once we did that, once we said, okay, if I'm going to have a timeout, I have to know where we are. It would be like having a basketball team, and when they called timeout, they put the scoreboard back to 0. Well, it's like, well, we played half a game. Well, it was the same way. We had half an argument, but the half of argument wasn't enough, and so we need a timeout. And now we need to come back to the argument where we were when we left it. I have seen couples who I think have argued the first 5 minutes of the same argument maybe 100 times, but they've never gotten further. They have a low tolerance for conflict, and so it gets so bad, and they say, okay, I got to do something with the conflict. They bring up the issue. It turns out it's a version of the same issue. They fight about it for 5 minutes, and then they say, no, we've got to stop. And then they fight that same 5 minutes over and over again. So I will tell you one more piece about this. Once we had a timeout, which I would abide by, which she would abide by. For me, it was not bringing the issue up because I still wanted to talk about it. For her, it was bringing the issue up sometime in the next 48 hours, and she was free to bring it up at the best possible time. She didn't have to wait till we were upset. She could bring it up after she just fed me my favorite food. She could bring it up after we've had a few minutes of intimacy together. I mean, she could bring it up at the best possible time. And sometimes that's all it took. Sometimes if she brought up the issue and I was just like, oh, that was just me. It's not a big issue. And that's useful, all right? So when we had that in place, so timeout. First thing is that I do not bring, I'm going to use her and I. It may be different in your personalities in your marriage, but for me, she and I needed to make sure I did not bring it up in any way, shape, or form. I didn't allude to it. When we're on timeout, we're on timeout. I'm not making good points. I'm dropping it. She had to make sure that she called time in so that I knew that she wasn't just trying to make it go away, ignore it. And we had to call time in at the point where we called time out. And I will tell you the thing I discovered. I did not know this. But the thing that I discovered when we did that was that we would go through. So instead of having our 7, 8, 10 minutes of conflict, we had a whole bunch of sessions where we worked through. And I am convinced that almost every time we were not arguing about something, we were arguing about what we were arguing about. And so we would finally work it through. Let's say 4 or 5, I remember, like 5 sessions. And we finally got to the root of the issue that we were arguing about. And we're like, oh, well, now that we know what we're arguing about, that's easy to fix. And we adopted a plan and implemented it, and it worked. Turns out we weren't fighting about what our values were and what we wanted to do. We were fighting about what we were fighting about. And if you want to hear me list stupid things to do, wow, that's pretty near the top, to spend time after time arguing about what you're arguing about. You don't know that. I didn't know that. I'm not blaming you for not knowing it. I'm telling you, I think that that's more common than we realize. But there it is. That's how we broke through. But I want to get back to the main point. The main point is that we didn't renew vows that kept us chained to the suboptimal. She didn't demand that I restate the fact that I am stuck with her and she's stuck with me. And by God, we're going to stick it out. As miserable as it makes us, we're going to stick it out. That was not the renewing of the vows that happened. The renewing of the vows that happened sort of like, we didn't even know that we were doing it, but the renewing of the vows was this process of us saying, everything is on the table. We can talk about anything. If we're unhappy, that is a sign to us that we need to renegotiate and look harder to try to find some place where I could give her more of what she wants while she's giving me more of what I want. Maybe we won't find it. Maybe all we'll find is a way to divide the misery evenly, but even that's better than one person finding a way to leverage it so the other takes more misery. If we said there's this much misery and at least we can share it evenly, that's a progress for a lot of marriages. But I believe that you can find a place where you say, I can get you more of what you want while you are giving me more of what I want. And so we are going to put everything on the table to be renegotiated as often as we need to. Our promise is not chaining us to the suboptimal. Our promise is chaining us to this person. Mary was my partner to optimize our marriage. I think that's a promise worth making. If you haven't made that promise, I think it might be worth making it. And I know it's going to take a lot of talking. And I think one of your opponents is actually going to be the traditional systems that have told you, nope, it's not anywhere near that complicated. You just don't get divorced. And I'm like, well, I think that's a great starting point. But if that's not the starting point to optimize your marriage, I don't know what to say. But there are people, I know it, who are unwilling to optimize. Maybe we'll talk about that separately. I don't know what to do if you're with someone who says, nope, I am not giving up the leverage that I got when you promised me. I'm not going to give that up. I'm not going to take the chance that we could optimize. I want that power. I don't know what to say. I mean, contact me in the comments. I'll hammer it out with you, and I won't give you answers, but I'll give you lots of things we can think about together. I don't know what to do with that, but for a lot of you, if you realize that you are acting like you're Christian or whatever other religion you're in, that your marriage requires you to act like you are chained to the suboptimal, I want you to renew your vows. I want you to update them. And I want you to figure out what it will take to get with your spouse and say, let's make a different promise. Let's make the promise that every time we see a way to improve our relationship, we are going to take it. We are going to optimize every aspect of our marriage except for one. Our optimizing partner is going to remain as long as we live. I miss my optimizing partner more than I can tell you. Tomorrow will be the first anniversary without her. But I am so glad that I did not keep on running out the clock, because running out the clock is the worst thing I ever had happen. I am so glad that we decided that we weren't running out the clock, that I didn't get to the end and say, I made it. I didn't break my promise. The thing I miss is my optimizing partner. I go through and I come home and I say, honey, you got to listen to this and see if it says what I mean to say. And then she's not there. She would make this podcast better. It would be one of the things that would be optimized by her partnership. Well, that's where I am today. Please leave me comments here on the YouTube format or on the UI podcast at proton.me. Let me know what you think, and happy trail.